So welcome to this edition of the Mile 27 podcast. My name is Cathy Duffy, and with me today is head coach Andy Dubois. Welcome, Andy.
Hey, Duff, how are you today?
I'm good. Have you done your run today, or is it a recovery day for you today?
I snuck out for a quick 5K this morning, so just to freshen up the legs and do something, which is nice.
Another run in paradise. Excellent. Well, I'm very excited to be here today. We've actually had a lot of requests for this podcast. And we do have a slightly different format. And part of the new format is yours truly. So for those that don't know me, I am the newest coach to the Mile 27 team. But I have been a member of the Mile 27 family for over 10 years now. Andy, 10 years you've been stuck with me. What do you think about that?
Feels like forever.
Hey, we've got an unwritten rule that we don't tell everybody that I'm your favorite athlete, but we'll move on. So today's not about me, but to start about me, and there is an important reason why I'm going to start with, I guess, my story and how I came to Mile 27, because it does lead to the topic for today. So about 12 years ago, I was wanting to do a road marathon, so I grabbed off the internet just a generic marathon program. I also went on running forums and spoke to a lot of people, and I did get the job done, and I did finish that marathon. But there was something in me, there was a passion in me that really wanted to get onto trails and to run longer and longer. So I did what I think a lot of people do, and I grabbed that marathon program and I just made it longer. I guess, Andy, you've probably heard that quite a lot. So I made this marathon program, a road marathon program, and I made it longer, and I tried to mold it into this 100K sort of ultra trail event that I was wanting to achieve. And I guess that quantity over quality type became an issue for me, and it was clear that it wasn't sustainable what I was trying to achieve, and that's for many reasons, like injury prevention. Big one for me was work-life balance, and I guess ultimately maximizing my performance I wasn't going to achieve by just using a marathon program and trying to reformat it to fit what I wanted to do. So I found myself wanting to look for a coach, and at the time there were a few coaches around, and I know nowadays there's a lot more for people to choose from. And I spent time looking to see who was available, and I hope you don't blush, Andy, but I will speak about you for a moment. I did find that your knowledge and expertise really stood out to me, and I think the clincher for me was the fact that what you offered was an individual or a holistic program. And Andy, as we said, for the last 10 years has seen me raise my children from teenagers at the time into adults, seen me go through different careers, seen me choose different races, different distances, different terrain. He's been through it all with me, and amongst all of that, he's tailored and streamlined and given me a program to ultimately lead me to achieve things that I never thought was possible. So thank you, Andy, for that. And I guess this leads me into, it's very important to choose a coach that really fits you and where you are and how you are as a person. And I'd really wanted to put Andy in the hot seat today to discuss the origin story of Mile 27. Not only I think is it interesting for us members already a part of the Mile 27 family, but for those people out there who are perhaps looking for a coach, and are we the right fit for you? So I guess, as I said, it's not about me today, and that's probably enough of me right now, but I wanted to really jump into how Mile 27 came about. But before we get into that, Andy, was the younger Andy always interested in sports? Has running always been something that you've wanted to do?
Yeah, so I've got a photo. My mum showed me a photo of me when I was age 5. I was in kindergarten, and I'm winning a 100-meter race on a grass oval wearing no shoes, barefoot. It was the only 100-meter race I've ever won, and the only sprint I've ever won, and the only time I've run a race barefoot. But nevertheless, it was back then something that I did. And I found through school, although I was a traditional boy back in those days playing football and cricket, the thing I loved most about sport was pre-season training. So the chance to run laps around the oval was the highlight for me. Once we started doing ball skills, it's like, not as much fun. So I really enjoyed training per se, cross-country running from a very, very early age and all throughout school. But it wasn't really, two things happened in school that kind of pushed me more into running. One, I came last in a race when I was in year 8. The school athletics team picked me for the athletics team. I went to the state championships, and for some reason, and I really never found out why, they put me in a 100-meter race, which I may have been fine at when I was 5, but at age 13 or 12, wherever I was, I wasn't, and I came last. And the experience still haunts me to this day. It's like, and I remember saying to myself, I am never coming last in a race ever again. Like, it really pinned itself into my brain. So that was a big thing for me, that moment, because what happened then, I kind of went off running for a couple of years, put off by that experience. As any teenager coming last in a race will kind of not respond well to it usually. But eventually I kind of got back into running, and then realized that, okay, it's longer distances that I'm good at. And then got picked for the athletics team again, and started to do all right at the kind of 800 cross country, 1500 type races. And then the thing that really kind of tipped me over the edge towards running was my athletics coach at the time, that the school coach picked me as the vice captain of the athletics team. So for me, that was huge. It was like showing me that, like, I was a nerdy kid at school. I was quite intelligent, got good marks for maths and physics and stuff. And typically, the captain of the cricket team, the football team, or the athletics team is the jock. It's the kid that's really good at sport. It's not, and usually the two aren't the same. That's how it was back then.
Why do you think they chose you in this leadership role then?
I don't know. I don't know. To be honest, I really don't know. I think they must have seen something in me that showed that I had the ability to lead people, to inspire people. And I think maybe because I was a hard worker. I mean, I was, even back in year 11 and year 12, when I was racing, I was getting beaten by kids who were clearly better than me, but also clearly didn't train. So it was just genetically, they would, a good mate of mine, for example, would beat me all the time. He smoked, did no training and smoked. No.
We love those people, don't we?
Whereas I was a kid that borrowed the Robert de Castella's book of running from the library and devoured it, and then put up my own program and went out to the Oval on a Saturday by myself and marked out 100, 200, 300, 400 meter runs and trained and did an interval session, because the only way I could be good at anything was to train hard. So
that's fascinating. As an early teen, you loved running. You had already recognized that you were better at the long distance stuff, and you sought out a way to actually train, and you self-coached.
Pretty much, yeah. I mean, I've always been pretty full on in anything I do, which wouldn't surprise anybody that does ultras, really. We're all the same.
Yeah.
So if I go in something, I go all in. There's no half measures, really. So once I decided I want to be better at running, then, well, the only way to be better is A, to train more, but B, I need to know what to do. Like, I don't know how to train. And of course, my school athletics coach, great guy, I'm still in contact with him on Facebook, but he was a teacher at the school, just doing his best. He's no expert. He helped me out, but it was up to me to find out how I could be better. I still got that book from the library. I never returned it, actually.
Imagine the bill now.
It's still somewhere in my box of books, running books somewhere. So yeah.
Well, it served you well, so we'll let that one fly. So it's always been running then for you?
Yeah. It's never been anything else. I mean, I love cricket and was half decent at cricket, but running was always a thing. And even I probably had a year at uni where I drank more than I ran. I think we've all had that period of our lives, but that didn't last very long. And then I was feeling a bit lost with life, really. Like, uni wasn't really ticking my boxes in terms of what I wanted to do. I didn't really know what I wanted to do in terms of career. Like, it must have been 17, 18, 19, I don't know. And then I saw, Wide World of Sports on Channel 9 was a big thing back then. It's not on anymore for those who are a bit younger than me. But for us oldies, Wide World of Sports on Channel 9 was the Saturday afternoon highlight. And back then, the Hawaiian Ironman was something that was showing, like, once a year. They had the highlights of the Hawaiian Ironman. And for some reason, I watched that. It was the year, still remember the year, it was the year 1989 was the race that I saw when Mark Allen and Dave Scott, for those Ironman aficionados, had the big jewel in the sun, they call it, and Mark Allen won. And I still remember watching that and see, also the year that Dick Hoyt pushed his son with cerebral palsy, dragged him in a boat, pushed him on a bike, pushed him in a wheelchair to finish the race as well. And I still remember watching that thinking, that's what I want to do. Now, I don't know why. I wasn't a swimmer. I wasn't a bike rider. I was a runner. had never really swum other than just as a kid. When I was a kid, we always swim. Never really ridden a bike very far or consistently or for any real reason. But for some reason that stuck in my head. And that was a pivotal moment. That virtually changed my life, turned it around to where I am now. Because once I had that thought in my mind, within weeks I just stopped drinking, full stop, and started training.
So
And
you're
that
in
just set me on the path.
so you're in your 20s at this time, and you had this I guess this pivotal moment as you describe, and I had something similar where all of a sudden this fire was lit in my belly, and it's just fascinating. And I wonder how many of the listeners out there also have experienced something like that, where there's a moment that just leads you down a path that's, I guess, meant to be for you. So you're in your 20s, you're at uni, and you're completely changing your lifestyle at this point and heading towards a new sport.
Yep. And it's look, it wasn't smooth sailing. Being the compulsive over, someone who kind of goes in head first, I took myself to the pool and swam 2 kilometers a day, 5 days in a row, and continued that this is with no swimming background whatsoever. Continued that for a couple of months until I got shoulder tendonitis in both shoulders and couldn't lift my arms above my shoulders. I couldn't swim. Bike riding, I got knee injuries from riding too much, and I got every injury known to mankind that a runner can ever have, because I went from running just not much at all to trying to run 50, 60, 70, 80k a week, pushing hard, not doing runs easy enough, making all the mistakes that everyone's made. So I got injured a hell of a lot. Like, if you name the running injury I've had, it shin splints, stress fractures, ITP, knee problems, calf problems, Achilles problems, plantar fasciitis, like I've had everything.
It's sort of interesting. Sorry, Andy, I was just going to say, it just sort of echoes what I was saying earlier, is that as we move to these endurance events, when you don't know how to train for them, you just train longer and further. And as you say that, and harder, and you pay a price for that. You do indeed. And it took me quite a few years to get on top of things to a point where I could actually train. So my idea when I saw Hawaii on TV was like, right, I'll give myself a year to get into my first triathlon. Then the year after, I'll do a qualifying race, and after that, I'll do Hawaii. Box ticked, done. 2.5 year project. Sounds easy.
It took a little bit longer than that. But I learned a whole lot of lessons along the way, which I think have held me in good stead in later life. All those injuries taught me I needed some help. I needed some more guidance in my training. I needed to find out what I was doing wrong. I needed some strengthening work. I needed some physio. I just needed a lot of guidance from a lot of different avenues to get myself to the point where I could train consistently enough to be able to get the results that I wanted. So yeah, it took a while. It wasn't an easy process, but it was a very beneficial one. Were you still coaching yourself at this time, Andy, or were you looking? I was initially. I probably went to the physio first, getting injured. I became good mates with the physio. I used to see him almost on a weekly basis for literally years. And I think I paid for his sports car personally. I think I was probably the biggest contributor to that. But eventually I kind of thought, you know what, I'm floundering here. Like, I was the type of kid who would go to the news agency all the time and buy all the latest triathlon magazines and then cut the articles out and then get an index folder, put a headline on the front page and cross-reference all the articles in there. And just over time built up this reference of training articles. But like, reading stuff is one thing, putting it into practice to yourself is something completely different. That's why coaching is what it is. You can pretty much go on the internet now and look up any topic you want. It doesn't matter what it is, and you'll find information. But how that applies to you and how you do it yourself is a completely different thing. So despite reading a stack and learning a lot, I still was getting injured and making all these mistakes. So I needed help. So yeah, so a coach was the next step. So fortunately I found a triathlon club, and I joined the club, and things gradually started to turn up from that point. Did you achieve what you wanted to achieve in triathlons? Yeah, I think so. Like, it took a while. I think the setbacks I faced were more beneficial than if I'd done what I'd done in a 2.5 year period. Like, it took me 5 years. Like, everyone said, no, you need to do shorter distance for like 2 or 3 years, then move into half Ironmans for a couple of years, then do Ironmans. Like, no. You're not understanding me. You're not listening. I just want to do Ironman. I don't want to do anything else. Like, I just want to do Hawaii, that's it. So that was a bit pig-headed from me, but it actually worked out. I moved into Ironman in my second year in triathlon, and although I didn't qualify, I actually went pretty close in my first Ironman. Did 10 hours 12, which was only half hour or so off qualifying back then. So I was pretty close my first year. So I thought, I'm on track here. But then, yeah, setback after setback. I had flat tires and broken the seat post, that the bolt that holds your seat onto your bike, that broke in half halfway through a bike ride in the race. So yeah, I was cruising along at 40 k's an hour. Next minute, I was sliding on my back on the bitumen at 40 k's an hour, going, what the hell happened then? Then I got bitten by wasps the day before the race, and I have an allergic reaction to insect bites and got all fuzzy and lightheaded on the bike, had to walk the whole run.
So it's interesting. It sounds like, sorry, you've learned a lot about coaching and what you need, the physicality of the sport. But all these setbacks, I guess, have also created like the mental side of things and being able to cope with the injuries and cope with these setbacks. Do you think that was really developing during these years as well?
Look, I think setbacks is crucial for development. I've got two younger kids, 6 and 9, and I've done a bit of research on child development, just because something I'm interested in. And all the research shows that the kids that are naturally talented at a young age typically don't develop into high quality athletes at an older age. And the reason for that is they don't have to try very hard. They're not used to setbacks. They're not used to having to overcome anything with any effort at all, because they're just good at a young age compared to their peers. Whereas the kids that aren't good at 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, that have to try harder, have to deal with getting beaten on a regular basis, develop the mental and physical skills to become better. So when they get to 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, when everybody's good or even older, they've got the skills to deal with setbacks, and they know they have to work hard to be good, compared to if you've never had to overcome a setback. If you've always been naturally talented at something, when somebody beats you, you're going to go, what? Well, now you're not enjoying the sport anymore. So for me, I think as much as it was extremely difficult at the time, I mean, to give you an insight, I quit uni. I finished uni, sorry. I was working part-time in a gym, 20 hours a week, living at home, 24, 25 years old. My life revolved around training. Like, I wasn't quite good enough to be an elite, but I was just kind of that level below being an elite Ironman at the time. So my whole life was revolved around training for an Ironman. I didn't race very often. I only raced a couple of races a year, plus the Ironman to qualify for Hawaii. So every waking moment was for Ironman. So when you get to the race and you get a flat tire or your bike breaks down or you get bitten by wasps, and you've had 11 months of training leading up to that one race, that was the only thing that mattered for the whole year, it's tough. And you learn quickly whether it's important to you or not, because it could have been easy to say, oh, look, it's clearly the universe is telling me something. The universe is saying, no, it's not for you, Andy. Just give it up. Go back to a proper job. Go back to a 9 to 5 job and just get back to a normal life. So it would have been easy to say that, but no.
I think the fascinating thing for me so far is your story to date has actually highlighted a lot of the strengths that you've and the information, the knowledge that you've imparted on me in the last 10 years. So I get a niggle or an injury, I know now why you know straight away how to deal with it, because you've experienced it all. I know why that you're calm when I'm not leading into my first 100-mile race. I know why you've now got all this wonderful advice on how to actually I guess tackle these challenges, or when I did have my DNF, how do I now move past that? So it's providing this wonderful context for me. I think for also our listeners, Andy, I'd like you to not be humble right now and let them know what and I've got the information here. What was your PB on the Ironman, and in particular, what was your marathon time at the end of that?
Yeah, so I went from the third Ironman I did, I ran a 6:50, I think, which was pretty slow. Obviously, I walked 95% of it.
Yeah.
The following year, my fourth Ironman, I ran 3:12, and I got an award for the most improvement, because I improved my Ironman split time by like 3.5 hours, whatever it was. But then finally, my fifth Ironman, when I finally qualified for Hawaii, I managed to do a 3:03 marathon and put it all together for a qualifying time.
That's insane. So you're proud? All that hard work.
That race, like, I've only probably had 2 or 3 races in my life where I can honestly say that I can't imagine how I could have run that, ridden that, swum that any faster. Like, it was one of those races where I knew nothing was going to stop me from doing what I wanted to do. And I'd gone to bed for the last year, and every night I closed my eyes, I would envisage the race in my head. I'd go through the swim, go through the bike, go through the run. And every time I tried to envisage going faster than 9 hours 20, I would fall asleep and like never cross the finishing line. I just didn't see 9:10 or 9:15. It never happened. But 9:20, I could always see myself in my mind crossing at 9:20. I did 9:19:37. So I just don't think I could have gone any faster. And the feeling you get, and I'm sure those listening have hopefully had at least one race like this, when you've trained really, really solidly and put in all you could for your training, and then you've got to race day and you've laid it all out in the line, and it's come off, and you cross that finishing line knowing that, like, that's the race I wanted to have. It's such a good feeling. It's just a drug. You want more of it. I want to do that again.
Oh, it's worth working for and taking the time in the lead up. I guess from here, Andy, I'm very curious to know how we went from Hawaii Ironman to a trail runner.
So, winter time in Adelaide, where I'm from and where I train for Ironmans, this coaching squad I train with, we used to do trail runs during the winter, just a general strength. To me, it wasn't trail running; it was just running. Like back in the early 90s, trail running, in mid 90s, trail running wasn't really a thing. So it was just running, and whether you're running on road or trails, like, it was just a run. We never made any distinction between the two. So for me, long runs in winter were on steep trails, and in summer they became more road focused, and it was just how I did it. So I'd always run trails without even really thinking that I was running trails. But then once I'd done Ironman a few times, and after I qualified once, I qualified again and did it Hawaii again, and then moved to London in 2005. And then once I got to London, I kind of thought, what do I want to do training wise? And anybody who's lived in London or visited London will know the climate's not that great for training. It's great for running, but for cycling particularly, it's pretty miserable because it's cold and wet all the time. And the swimming pools are typically in basements, and they're 19.9 meters long, because the regulations are, if you 20 meters or longer, you have to have a lifeguard. So to save money, you don't just make a 19.9, so you don't have to pay the wage of a lifeguard. So swimming in a basement, 19.9 meters, compared to in Adelaide, I was swimming in an outdoor pool, 50 meters. It's not what I want to do.
Lost its shine by the sounds.
Yeah, definitely. And I'd done Hawaii twice and kind of think, well, I think I've ticked that box. I don't know what else I want to do, but I think I'm happy with that. I did a marathon. I did Adelaide Marathon and did the Edinburgh Marathon. I kind of like, yeah, it was good, but like it didn't really float my boat like an Ironman did. And then a mate of mine said, look, there's this race in Scotland. It's 95 miles. What do you reckon? It's like, oh, that sounds awesome. Sounds fantastic. Now, like, I'd never done an ultra before, never done a trail race before. So for most people, you're thinking, what on earth are you thinking that you can go from a road marathon with no trail experience to a 95-mile race? But you got to remember, this is the same guy who went from doing no triathlons whatsoever to doing an Ironman like 18 months later.
Seeing a pattern here, Andy.
Yeah, and look, yes, I was wiser, but I still made so many mistakes in training for that first ultra and in racing that first ultra. It was, yeah.
I can see it in your eyes as you're trying to process. How am I going to describe this experience?
I finished, so I'm pretty happy with that. I finished my first ultra, which is 95 miles long. It took me 27 hours or something. But to give you some context, I went out with the guy who won it. I went out with him, and he set the race record that day. So I spent the first 20 miles running with him. And my thought process was, look, I'm a 303 Ironman runner. I'm a good runner. So I could have probably done a 240-ish, maybe a bit quicker marathon, something like that, if I was fully focused on a marathon. So I thought, well, I'm a pretty good runner. So look, I'm going to have a crack and go out at this pace and just see what happens. Well, what happened was I blew up massively, like the biggest blow up that I've ever had in my life.
I think the road runners out there listening to us today, Andy, would think that was a reasonable way to approach a trail race. Trail runners, the trail runners out there will be thinking, what was,
Yeah. Yeah.
we understand why you blew up.
So I got, and this was another pivotal experience in my life, in that I got to about 60 miles in, and it was in Scotland, and this leg, and I can't remember the exact numbers, from one checkpoint to another, you cross over this fairly remote, vast, open kind of gully. And I remember no longer being able to run. I just had no energy. My legs, quads are completely shot. And I still had 30 miles to go. Barely able to eat. And I sat down on a rock or something, tried to force a banana down. I thought, well, no one's coming to get me here. I'm going to have to get to the next checkpoint. And from there, I'll just, I'll pull out. Like, I can't finish this. No way I can finish. So I just trudged, walked, given up, basically, given up. Walked into the checkpoint, and this race you had to have a crew. And looking back, it's I've never had a crew since, and I don't like having a crew personally, but for this race I was really glad I had a crew, because what happened was I walked into the aid station, and Catherine, my wife, saw me and saw how bad I was, and she'd never seen me that bad before. And so she started getting tears, and one of my crew took her and whisked her away so she couldn't see me.
Smart move, yes.
Yeah, smart move. The other two got me into the car, gave me a Coke, put my jacket on, and said, right, let's go. And I'm like, what? What do you mean, let's go? But because I was so tired, so exhausted, I just kind of followed orders. I didn't have the capacity to argue. So I just kind of went out and just walked with my pacer. And my pacer said, oh, do you want to start running now? So I can't run. So come on, just run 5 steps. We'll just run 5, 10 steps. That's all. So we started doing that. Then basically I just did what I was told. Like my brain is switched off, and I just did what I was told. And gradually, somehow, the legs came back to me. I ended up having that next leg from checkpoint 7 to 8, wherever it was I was in the top 10 fastest runners in that leg. Now, I still to this day have no idea how that happened. But
wow.
It meant from then, the next 2 legs I blew up again massively, and it was a walk, a limp to the finish. But it meant that once that leg got through, I knew I could finish. It was only 20 miles to go, or 15, so I knew I could finish. So for me to get to the absolute depths of despair and the lowest of lows you could possibly have. Now, anybody who's done a long ultra knows what that's like. We've all have been there. But when it's your first time, you need something to be able to get you back out of it again. Now, whether you're being coached and you've been given a lot of advice on what it's going to feel like, whether you've got a crew there, or whether you can draw on your own previous mental experiences, doesn't really matter. But you've got to have something there to help you out. In my case, it was a combination of my Ironman experience, but also having that crew that just didn't give me the choice to pull out. They never asked me, do you want to pull out? They never asked me, do you feel like you can continue? They just fed me, clothed me, and pushed me back out the door.
I love that. That's the recipe for a good crew, isn't it?
It was a good crew, very good crew.
You did touch on your previous experience and how it helped in this scenario. And I was going to ask the depths that you had to go in your Ironman, did it compare to this experience at all, or are they just apples and oranges?
Apples and oranges to a degree. Like in Ironman, it's all about maintaining the intensity. Can I keep this pace up? Whether it's a swim, bike, or run, it's when you're running that fast, just over a 3-hour marathon, it's you're looking at your watch, 4:30 pace, 4:20 pace, let's keep it up, another K. It's always about that intensity. It's never really about, for me at that level, it's never really about can I finish. It's always about can I keep this pace up and do the time I wanted to do. Whereas for 100 mile, particularly your first 100 mile, once you've done a few and you've got some experience and you maybe done the course before, you might be able to start thinking about times. But for most of it, it's about can I finish this? Can I dig myself out of this hole to a level where I keep going, stay ahead of the cutoffs, and get myself to the finishing line without killing myself, not literally, but like figuratively speaking, so I can do other races.
Well,
so it's a very different kind of thing.
And you definitely did dig yourself out of that hole, didn't you? What was the biggest learning from that first race of yours?
Well, the biggest thing was that hole, that no hole is too deep that it can't be dug out of with the right approach.
Nice. So I think that needs to be the catchphrase. No hole is too big; it can't be dug out of. We might need to fix the grammar on that, but I do like that.
Whilst there are exceptions to that in terms of if your health is in jeopardy and stuff. If it's just a mental low, then I think with the right approach, it can be dug out. The second main takeaway I got from that though was that, wow, I just did 95 miles. That's like 4 times as long as I've ever done before in my life running. So for me, it proved once again, and having stepped up from doing short triathlons to Ironman in a very short space of time, there was some belief that I could do what shouldn't be really possible. But then doing that again was like, oh, it's amazing what we can achieve. It's amazing that you can go from doing a marathon to doing 95 miles and find a way to finish it. So your belief in doing what you thought was maybe not possible is now like the bar's been raised again. It's like, well, maybe I didn't think this was possible, but it is now. So, you can raise that bar again and again. I think that's true for all of us. Like we have these kind of self-limiting beliefs. Think, well, I don't know if I can do that. And I think if you let those self-limiting beliefs hold you back from trying something, you never really know what you can achieve. You've just got to, sometimes you've got to put it all on the line and be prepared to fail to see what you can achieve. Otherwise, you're always going to stay in your comfort zone. I think that will hold you back and you kind of shortchange yourself, because we're all capable of more than what we think we can.
Oh, 100%. And I think that's one of the big things that I learned from you, Andy. As I said, I've achieved things that I never thought possible. Stage events, UTMB, all these things. I'm so proud of myself, and it's because of, I guess, a lot of wisdom that I've actually got a book. I have a book that I wrote down. I seriously do. I should have had it here, but I've got a book there of all the comments that you gave me leading up to my first 100-mile race, all the nuggets of wisdom. And one day I will share it, because I think everyone can sort of benefit from this information. And I know from here you obviously did a lot of trail races, and without going into all of them, is there one that is the most special to you for whatever reason, good or bad?
Yeah, so after West Highland Way, and look, I was in bits, absolute bits after that race, to the point where, when you board a flight and they ask if anybody's like infirm or disabled or whatever it is, come to the front of the line. I was walking so, yeah, it's like me, like I need help. I could barely walk. And when I say, I don't mean the traditional barely walk after an ultra where, upstairs you're going backwards and downstairs, it's really difficult. I mean, literally I could barely walk. My steps were like, 10 centimeters. Like, it was painful. I probably had rhabdo in hindsight. So I was in absolute bits. And then I was just surfing around the internet one day, a few months afterwards, once I recovered, and it took me ages. Like I had numb feet for like months afterwards. I didn't get proper feeling back. Like, seriously, it was an absolute mess, which is a reflection of the hole I dug myself in, and also the training, which was totally inappropriate for what I was trying to do. But I learned a few lessons. And then I was looking around the internet thinking, what do I want to do now? Like, I thought, you know what? I think I've got something more to give for this ultra stuff. I think I'm capable of more than that. I think I probably stuffed up a lot of things, and I think I can do a bit better. So this race popped up, and it was in France, and it ran around into 3 countries, around a big mountain. And most of you know what I'm talking about. Back then, there were no running stones. There was no lottery. It was first in, first served. So I discovered the entry date, and on January, whatever it was, and I got online at 9 o'clock, and back then the race sold out in 9 hours. Obviously everyone knows UTMB, it's much harder to get into.
Very different process now.
Yeah. So even though I'd only done one ultra, you didn't need to have any experience to sign up for UTMB, like as long as you paid your money, which back then was only, I think, 90 euros, 2007 it was. So I signed up for UTMB, and then had a good look at my training and completely changed everything about it. Like, just went back to the drawing board, rubbed out everything I'd done for West Highland Way, Scottish race, and came up with a completely new training plan for UTMB. And then come UTMB, I had one of those races like the Ironman that I had, where, I had this time chart and I thought, based on some other runners that I knew that I'd run with or had seen their times, I kind of thought, well, maybe 34 hours is possible. 32 on a really good day, 30, like if I could get close to 30, that would be just amazing. So I had time charts printed out, and this is one of the reasons why I recommend all my athletes don't print out time charts. So I had them printed out, and I started off at 30 hours, on track for 30 hours, and then it was tipping down to 32 hours. By the time I got to Courmayeur, I was kind of on track for about 33 hours. And this isn't really helping me much. This is not like I'm feeling pretty good, but looking at these time charts, it's not really helping. So I threw them away and just thought, I'm just going to run and enjoy it. And then what I found was people that were passing me downhills before weren't passing me anymore, and I was starting to pass more and more people. And once I got over Grand Corps Ferret at 110k or whatever it is, no one was passing me anymore, and I found I was passing lots of people, and it was almost like I was in a separate race. Like I was just passing them so fast that they was like, bam, they're gone, rather than the typical ultra marathon, like they're ahead and like 5Ks later you finally catch up to them, and then very slow process.
Absolutely. You come a long way from that 13-year-old who come last in that race, eh?
A long way. And I got down to the flat, like almost like 2Ks to go off the mountains back on the flat. And for the first time on a flat or downhill, I stopped to a walk. And I thought, hang on a second, what are you doing? You've run literally every step of every downhill and every flat section. Don't walk now. So I picked it back up again, and then I finished in 28:45, and it just blew me away that was even possible. I kind of thought, wow, that. Like,
so that to give the listeners some context, that's the top 3% of the finish field. So that's exceptional again. Very well done.
Yeah, I was pretty stoked with that, and it just showed me that I did have some potential doing ultras, and I probably did know something about training for ultras, because in the background to all of this was that I'd given up the job as a surveyor. Like I did a surveying degree and hated it, so I became a personal trainer. And then did personal training for a while. Then I did a triathlon coaching course and a strength and conditioning coaching course. And I was the guy who would, if you went to my gym and you were training for a triathlon or a marathon, you'd go see Andy. I'd give him a running program or a triathlon program or a strength program. So I was the person you went to get help to train for those events. So, and that continued throughout when I was in London. I was a personal trainer working with, some athletes doing marathons in my personal training business. But once I'd done UTMB, I kind of thought, I've gone from like a 26-hour West Highland Way to a 28-hour UTMB. And like the comparisons, a 28-hour UTMB is equivalent to about a 17-hour West Highland Way. So it was a vast improvement on my first performance. So I thought to myself, well, maybe I do know something about how to train for an ultra now. Maybe I've really cracked the code, so to speak. So that was kind of the first kind of time I kind of thought, I think I can coach people to do ultras, because I've learned so much over the years in terms of marathon, triathlon, and now ultra marathon, that I think I've got enough knowledge and experience to impart to others to help them do ultra marathons. So that's really when it started.
Yeah, so it sounds like you were using yourself as your own experiment. You were coaching yourself. Initially. Yeah. So so we're already coaching. So you're getting the principles of, developing relationships and sort of, some of the art of coaching. But then you sort of steered towards ultra trail after your UTMB success. So you jumped right into coaching from there. Did you jump straight into, I'm going to do mile 27? Was that something that came with time? How did you develop into an ultra trail coach from there?
So initially it was just whoever was at the gym. And then I was lucky enough to have had a few athletes. One guy did MDS and a few other races. One girl did a race to the North Pole. So there were a few interesting athletes that I was privileged enough to help coach. And that really whet my appetite for coaching ultras rather than just coaching marathons. So then being a personal trainer, like it was always like online coaching didn't really exist back in 2006, 2007. So it was only face-to-face coaching. It wasn't really a business coaching ultra runners. It was more personal training and a little bit of side stuff in ultra marathons. It wasn't really till I left London and came back to Sydney to start a life again in Australia, and I was working in a gym. And I set up a website, and the website, when we set it up, my wife's a graphic designer, and when we set up the website, we kind of thought, well, I want to, like, a personal training's got to be the business because there's no money in anything else. But I also want to attract marathoners and ultra marathoners because I'd like to do more of that in my coaching business. So that I want a name that kind of can ring true for both kind of parties, so people who want to get fit and stronger, but also who want to get better at marathons and particularly ultra marathons. So we threw around a lot of names, and mile 26 came up with, I can't remember if it was Cathy or a mate of mine suggested it. And I thought, 27. Marathon's 26. 27 means an ultra marathon, but it also has that connotation of going the extra mile in terms of service and support and stuff, which resonates with how I wanted to coach people. I wanted to be somebody who would give more than what is expected in the coaching business. So, you know, they would expect a certain amount and I would give them more than that to really help them on their journey. So Mile 27 seemed like a fairly logical name for how I wanted to approach the business.
I love that. I love that. Taking you the extra mile. I think that's how we need to finish the podcast when we get to the end. Let us take you the extra mile. So, I mean, that I guess then leads into what does giving your athletes more, what does that look like? Like, what were you hoping to achieve?
So I think in the coaching industry, and particularly now, but even back then when I started, there's a lot of information out there, but a lot of it needs to be interpreted specific to the event and the athlete. So just in the way that you approach your first ultra, in that you took a marathon plan and just went longer. I mean, that's exactly how I approached my first ultra. I just kept all the nuts and bolts of a marathon plan and I made my long run up to 70 Ks, which just didn't work the West Highland way at all. So that's still, well, back then was still pretty much how a lot of people approach training for an ultra. It's like, well, all the same principles apply. You want a big aerobic base, you've got to do some speed work. So we'll just take a marathon plan and we'll put your long run on trails, make it a bit longer, away you go. And I knew what I'd done at UTMB and it wasn't that. And I knew from reading, you know, the teenage boy who, the early 20s boy who collected triathlon magazine that cut out articles and catalogued them was now the man who looked up research articles online. And I've got a database of over 2,500 articles that I've collected over the years. So now I kind of looked at the latest research articles and looked at the studies that were out there and looked at how other elites were training and applied the knowledge I had to the demands of ultras. And I could see that, look, I really don't think that marathon training plus a bit more is what needs to happen when you're training for an ultra. So I saw that there was a gap in the market because most people coaching, that's how they did it. So I thought, well, first of all, I want to make sure that the coaching we give our athletes is targeted towards ultras and is specific towards not only ultras, but the demand of the course. Like whether it's UTMB, your training is going to look a lot different compared to, say, Surf Coast 100. For those who don't know Surf Coast, it's a fairly flat trail race of 100 Ks in Victoria. So if you're training for that, it's going to look vastly different to even a 100K race CCC in UTMB. So I really wanted to get a training system that you could tailor to the race. But then all my experience in personal training and just coaching in general said, it's got to be tailored to the individual. We can't just take a blueprint and just tweak a few things and say, right, there's your plan. So I really wanted to give a business where we took the time to get to know the athlete, get to know why running was important to them, get to know how running fitted in with the rest of their life. Because a lot of Mile 27 clients are busy professionals with families. Now, all busy professionals with families will know time is a precious commodity. You haven't got a lot of time. You want to know what you're doing with your time is the best way to train. And you want to know how to maximize the use of the time you've got. So whether that's 6 hours or 12 hours or 8 hours, whatever it is.
Oh, so I just need to jump in, Andy, and share on that point. So as I mentioned, I was coming up to my first 100-kilometer race after I'd had your expertise training me and guiding me. And the first thing I noticed was I felt like I was training less, but that's where the quality of training came in. I wasn't just doing that ever-growing marathon program. And it led to, I think it was from memory, a 45-minute fast 100K when I repeated it. So yes, time was so precious to me then with a young family. So I had more time for my family. I was doing better training and I had a significantly better outcome.
I think the other thing is learning about the athletes, where they train, the environment they have to train on, whether they're flat. I know you live in one of the trail running meccas of the world. For those that don't know, it's not Chamonix, it's Guildford in Western Sydney.
Yeah.
So we knew we had to kind of approach things a little differently compared to someone living, say, in the Blue Mountains themselves. So it's getting to know an athlete's environment, how they can best train. Now, when I lived in London, I was training for UTMB. So most people think, well, how can you train for a race like UTMB and do so well at a race like UTMB when you live in London where there's no hills? Well, you can. You've just got to know how to use what you've got. So from a coaching point of view, I really wanted to try and learn about what environment the athlete has to train on, and not just give, say, look, a 4-hour hilly run. If getting to the hills means a 2-hour drive, like, well, we've got to come up with a better system, because, you know, a 2-hour drive and a 4-hour run and a 2-hour drive back 8 hours out of your day. Some people might be more than happy to do that. And I know you've done that quite a lot, Duffy, because you're happy to do that, especially when the kids have been a bit older. But for a lot of people, the 4 hours they've got is from the time they leave the front door to the time they get back again. So what can they do in their training environment to get the most out of their training? So it's not just about giving a training plan, it's learning about the athlete's goals, how running fits into their lifestyle, learning the type of terrain they've got to run on, and trying to put all that together to give them the best training plan possible to get them the results that they want for their race.
So you've been doing this for a while, and you've helped not only me, but many, 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 many athletes out there achieve so much. How does that make you feel?
So yeah, it's interesting. When I first started coaching, running was, you know, doing races myself was still very high on the priority list. I did do a few races. Then kids came along, young kids, and then obviously anybody with, you know, very young kids knows how time intensive they are. So my training got less and less and less. And then since the kids have got a bit older and I've tried to get back into racing, what I've found is that, like today's a classic example. So Friday is my day where I do admin stuff, do research, do product development, do podcasts and articles. Now, I could have gone for a longer run this morning. I only did like 30 minutes. I could have said, Duff, let's just move this podcast back a bit later, and I've got other things to do after this. I'll just do an hour and a half run, because, you know, my training is really important. I've got this race coming up. But I find myself being drawn more to coaching rather than pushing coaching back and doing more for my own training. That's not to say I don't want to get back into racing. I really do want to get back into racing. But when there's a choice between spending an hour on doing a podcast versus doing an extra half-hour run, I find myself drawn more to spending the hour on the podcast. I think that's a reflection on how much joy I get out of coaching, how much joy and reward and satisfaction I get from helping people achieve more than they thought possible. And look, there's many examples I could quote from, you know, people like Samaya Buddha, who's a Nepalese woman I coach, who came second at CCC, to people like yourself, Duff, who've come from doing their first 100K to finishing UTMB. Well, one example I really come back to, it made me so proud to be a coach, is a Hong Kong guy who wanted to do UTMB, and he got to halfway Kumayor and he was 7 minutes ahead of cutoffs. From that time on, he was never more than 3 or 4 minutes ahead of cutoffs. And a lot of the time he got into checkpoints and the volunteers are saying, look, there's no point continuing, he won't make the next cutoff. Or he'd leave that checkpoint and find other athletes returning saying, look, you won't make it. They'd given up. They were just telling him, like, you won't make the next checkpoint. Just give up now and save yourself the hassle. But thankfully, we'd had this big, long chat about this and said, look, unless you're physically pulled off the course and your number taken off you, I want you to keep going. So he had that voice in his head. He said, Andy said, don't give up unless I'm pulled off the course.
I'm not the only one with Andy's voice in my head. Yeah, good to know.
And look, he eventually made up some time for the last cutoff to the finish. He made up a few minutes and finished. He wasn't the last person, but I think he was probably the third or fourth last, I don't know. But he finished. And as a coach, it takes someone who, by all rights, should never have finished to finish one of the, you know, the races in the world, and to be that close to cutoff, and to just keep going, to push and to not give up. Like, my heart still beats a bit faster when I recall the tale. So it's so rewarding. I mean, I remember watching Ben Duffy at the Skyrunning World Champs, and it was a live stream, and seeing him finish third at the time back in 2000.
That was insane. Yeah, I loved that. You just like watched him come from behind, and it was the most exciting. Nuts. Yes, well done, Ben, for that one.
You know, my kids at the time, or I think it was probably just my youngest probably wasn't born then, going, what do you get excited about, Daddy? Like, what are you yelling at? And I was like, come on, Ben, come on. And like, to have that experience, you know, he's, you know, over in France and I'm in Australia, you get so emotionally attached to your athletes' results that, you know, you share some of that satisfaction of them finishing. Now, obviously, it's not as much as doing it yourself, but when you've got a number of athletes and almost every week you're sharing that experience of them finishing and them being so grateful to you for getting to the finish line, it's a hugely rewarding job that I just love.
I absolutely have to agree, and it's a big part of what I love about the coaching as well. And I think for those that know you, Andy, and those that are listening today or watching today, it's clear your passion for coaching, and you've managed to build a team around you as well. So Mile 27 has 5 coaches. Is there anything in particular, now without big noting me, but is there anything in particular that you look for when you are, you know, fitting a coach to Mile 27?
So new coaches wise, I've been asked a few times by various different people, could they come on board? And I've pretty much said no to everyone that's asked me, and not because they may or may not be a good coach, but I wanted the right fit. I wanted the people who come on Mile 27 to be the right fit. And I think the best way I could guarantee that people who come to Mile 27 to be coached could get the service that I wanted to give them, that I might not be able to provide them because I'm too busy, was to make sure the coaches that I took on were athletes that I'd coached myself. So they were in the Mile 27 family already, knew what coaching experience should be like because I've coached them, and then had the experience and knowledge to apply that to athletes they've coached. So every coach that's in Mile 27 has been coached for numerous years by myself, all of them 3, 4, 5 years before, with coached by me before they become coaches themselves. So I'm at the lucky point where all the coaches on Mile 27 are mates of mine. They're all good friends, really good friends, and you know, we have great chats, and I all respect them hugely, their knowledge and their experience. And I know that if someone comes to me for coaching and I are unable to coach them for whatever reason, then I can really confidently hand them on to any of you guys and know they're going to get the service that Mile 27 is about.
Absolutely. And for the listeners out there who want to know who these coaches are, or who aren't familiar, on the mile27.com.au website, there is some information on each coach's bio as well. Andy, do you think every ultra trail athlete needs a coach?
Good question. So I often get into arguments on social media and stuff about whether a coach is essential or not. And look, a coach isn't essential. You don't need a coach. You don't need to run ultra marathons. So there's no need to have a coach. What it comes down to is there's a lot of information out there. Do you want to sift through that information and become a guinea pig on that information yourself to find out what works for you? Now, some of you will say, yes, I do. I really enjoy that process of teaching myself and being a guinea pig and making mistakes along the way, which is fine. Coaching is not for you because you want to do it yourself. But for a lot of us, like if you've got a race coming up and you've invested the entry fee, which let's face it, is not cheap these days. You've invested the entry fee. It might involve a flight to a different country. It'll involve accommodation. It involves many hours of training. It involves running shoes, a running pack, all the nutrition stuff. Like there's a big financial cost to racing these days. Now, if you're willing to take a risk and be a guinea pig and make mistakes and learn from your mistakes, that's fine. But if you're the type of person that goes, look, I don't want to learn from making mistakes myself. I want to learn from other people's mistakes. And so I don't have to make those mistakes. So if I sign up for UTA, UTMB or Hong Kong 100 or whatever it is in 6 months' time, I want to minimize the mistakes. I want someone to help me reduce the chance of making those mistakes so I can get to the start line feeling like I'm really prepared and have the confidence to get through the race and enjoy the process and do the best I possibly can. Then coaching is for you. So I think the only people that shouldn't get a coach is those people who want to make mistakes on themselves. Otherwise, I think your coaching is for anybody else because it's such a rewarding experience if you get the right coach. Now, look, like any industry, there are some great coaches and there are some not so good coaches. And I think for those of you out there who are thinking about coaching, the best thing you can do, like there's an article, the blog I wrote about how to choose an online coach. And it's just a whole list of questions. We can link in the notes below this podcast and video. We can link to that. There's a whole list of questions that you should ask any potential coach. And if they don't give you good answers, go somewhere else. If it's not with mile 27, that's fine. But just make sure the coach you do get can answer all these questions before you jump on board, because I've heard some horror stories about coaching. And I've had a few people come on board. A few people, like, to give you an example, I've had an athlete come on board and he said, look, I won't mention names, so I don't want to badmouth any particular coach, but this athlete came on board and he had a major race coming up, a really significant race he was training for. And he did the race, and we talked about it afterwards, because he contacted me after the race was done. He said, look, in the 6 weeks leading up to that race, my coach didn't contact me once. He gave me the plan. So here's your plan for the next 6 weeks. And in the 6 weeks before a major race, he was never contacted to ask how your training is going, given a race plan, discussed how to approach the race. Nothing, no communication whatsoever. Well, that's not coaching.
No, what do you think? I know what I valued most, I guess, in our athlete coach relationship was, I guess, the communication and your accessibility. I was able to bounce, especially leading up to important races like my first 100-miler, where I think a lot of listeners out there would probably relate, where all of a sudden you have a million questions going through your head, and this mammoth task that you've set just seems so overwhelming. And you've always been that calming voice there to help me along the way. What do you think generally athletes value the most in your experience?
I think a lot of athletes sign up to a coach for a training plan, but then a good coach will make them realize that a training plan is like 30% of coaching, and it's 30% of getting results. Because a training plan, now whether a coach has written out a 12-week plan or you've downloaded a 12-week plan off the internet or whatever, it's a static thing that doesn't change. Now, the role of a coach is to analyze those training sessions and go, that was too fast, that was too slow, that was too hilly, that wasn't hilly enough. But also ask, did you enjoy that training session? How did you find it? Did you find it challenging? Did it challenge you in a way that felt really positive, or did you feel like a bit defeated by that session? How are you feeling about training in general? Are you feeling like it's progressing? Are you feeling like you're fatigued and tired all the time? Are you enjoying the process? Are you getting enough recovery to support the training plan? All the extra stuff that goes along with it. Are you eating enough? Are you eating enough during your training sessions to fuel your training? Do you feel like this race is one you really want to focus on, or are you just doing it because a stack of mates signing up for it and it's not really what you're that excited about, and maybe you'd be better off doing this race? It's all those extra questions that come into coaching that give coaching the value rather than just the training plan.
I guess that ties in with that old question, is coaching an art or a science?
Totally. And look, there's definitely a science to it. There's definitely a lot of research that I call upon and, is the basis of how I coach people. But I think it's really important to understand that when you look at ultra performance, you can look at a whole stack of variables. You look at the traditional VO2 max threshold, running economy, blah, blah, blah. And we won't go into those today. It's probably the topic of another podcast. But all the measurable factors that typically determine performance in 1 mile, 10K, marathon, they only account for like 50 to 60% of ultra performance. The other 40% is the art of coaching, is the bit that a really good coach can apply. Now, whether that's nutrition, whether that's the mental strength and the mental cues and the mental kind of development we give our athletes, whatever it is, it's that extra bit that determines whether you finish a race to your potential or you're finishing a race with a death march in the last 30K questioning your life choices. It's a big difference.
And the feeling that you knew well, hey, in your first ultra trail race. And definitely. Is there one thing that you want our listeners to actually remember from this conversation? If there was one thing that you could pick out, what would be that final message you'd want them to take away?
I think from a training point of view, because most people listening to a podcast like this are listening to gain more information about how to train for ultras. And I think from a training point of view, everybody needs someone who's got the experience and can share the knowledge with you. Now, whether that's an experienced mate, whether that's a good coach, it doesn't really matter. But I think we can all do more than what we think we can with the right training plan. I think a lot of us are limited by, maybe it's our beliefs, or maybe it's just lack of knowledge, or maybe it's the unwillingness to step outside a comfort zone and either ask for help. But I think most of us can achieve way more than we think we can if we're willing to put ourselves out there. Now,
we
whether
can
that
dig
be
ourselves out of the hole that
a
we've
big hole,
dug.
we can- So whether that's to open yourself up for coaching, or whether that's to open yourself up to the fact that your training may not be as efficient as it could be, and asking for advice, it doesn't really matter. But I think most people can achieve more than what they think they can, whether that be a faster time, whether that be a longer race, a more challenging race. It all depends on your own personal preferences. But I think too many of us, in a nutshell, too many of us have limiting beliefs, and we can achieve more than what we think we can if we're open to the ability to step outside our comfort zone.
I love that, and as Andy knows, I've got to do my trail run this afternoon, so my heart rate just beat faster with those words, and I'm sure I'll nail it for you and make you proud as always. So I guess if anybody out there is interested in any more information about coaching or anything that we've spoken to today, feel free to reach out to us. And as I said, there's mile27.com.au on our website. It has a lot of information about what we do and what we can offer and how to contact us. I did mention earlier, Andy, I think a good way to finish the podcast is to have that catchphrase. So let us help you take.
Let us take you the extra mile.
We've got to practice that. Let us help you take the extra mile. Thank you for joining.
Thanks, everyone. Catch you next time.